Newell Kim loved the early morning hours at the research station. The three suns of planet Co 2187 were just starting to rise, painting the sky in beautiful shades of purple and orange. She walked through the empty corridors of the station, carrying her favorite cup of green tea, heading to her small laboratory. As the lead botanist of the station, Newell spent most of her time studying the few hardy plants that managed to grow on this rocky planet. Today was different, though. The exploration team had found something unusual in the ruins they discovered last week. Dr. Jae-ho Park, the head scientist, was waiting for her at the lab door. His eyes were bright with excitement. "Good morning, Newell," he said, smiling. "Are you ready to see something amazing?" Inside the lab, on her work table, sat a clear container. Inside it was what looked like a large seed about the size of her palm. But this was unlike any seed Newell had ever seen. It was crystal-like and seemed to glow with a soft blue light. "We found it in what we think was an alien greenhouse," Jae-ho explained. "It was the only thing that survived in there. Everything else had turned to dust." He handed her a tablet with the initial scan results. "The seed is at least 10,000 years old." Newell carefully lifted the container. As soon as her hands touched it, the seed's blue glow became slightly brighter. She quickly put it down, surprised. "Did you see that?" Jae-ho nodded. "It does that every time a human gets close. We think it responds to our body heat, or maybe our electromagnetic field." He paused, looking thoughtful. "We need to study it carefully. But I want you to lead this project. You're our best botanist." Newell felt honored but also a little nervous. This wasn't just any plant study. This could be the first living piece of an ancient alien civilization they had ever found. Over the next few hours, Newell ran every safe test she could think of. The seed had a hard outer shell made of something like crystal, but scans showed living tissue inside. It was definitely alive, somehow sleeping all these years. Around midday, while Newell was taking notes, something changed. The seed's glow began to pulse slowly, like a gentle heartbeat. Each pulse sent out a wave of calm that Newell could actually feel. It reminded her of sitting in her grandmother's garden back on Earth. She quickly called Jae-ho back to the lab. More researchers gathered around as the seed continued its gentle pulsing. Everyone who came near it reported the same feeling of peace and tranquility. "What should we do?" Newell asked Jae-ho, who was watching the seed with fascination. He thought for a moment. "We need to understand it better, but I think it wants to grow." He looked at Newell. "Can you create a safe environment for planting it?" Newell spent the rest of the day preparing a special containment unit with carefully selected soil. She added sensors to monitor everything: temperature, moisture, radiation, and any possible chemical reactions. As the station's three suns began to set, painting the sky in deep reds and purples, Newell looked at the glowing seed one last time before heading to her quarters. She couldn't explain it, but she felt sure that something wonderful was about to happen. This wasn't just a seed. It was a message from the past, waiting all these years to be found. In her dreams that night, Newell saw vast gardens of crystal plants stretching to the horizon, their soft blue light turning the darkness into a gentle twilight. She didn't know it yet, but her dreams weren't just dreams. They were a glimpse of what was to come. The next morning, Newell arrived at her lab earlier than usual. She found Tai-Yang Lee, her research assistant, already there. The young scientist was carefully checking all the monitoring equipment they had set up the day before. "Everything is working perfectly," Tai-Yang said, looking up from his screens. "The containment unit is ready whenever you want to plant the seed." Newell looked at the crystal seed, still pulsing with its gentle blue light. The feeling of peace it gave off seemed stronger today. She put on her protective gloves and carefully lifted the seed from its container. As soon as she touched it, the pulsing quickened slightly, like an excited heartbeat. "I think it knows," she said softly. "It knows it's time to grow. With great care, Hay Newell placed the seed in the prepared soil. She had chosen a mix of earth soil and local minerals from the planet's surface. As soon as the seed touched the soil, its glow spread outward in gentle waves through the dirt. "Look at these readings," Tai Yang said, his eyes wide. "The seed is already changing the chemical composition of the soil around it." Over the next few hours, more researchers gathered in the lab to watch. Dr. Jeho Park stood next to Hay Newell, making notes as the soil continued to change color, becoming richer and darker. Then, just as the second sun rose into the purple sky outside, something amazing happened. A tiny crystal sprout pushed through the soil. It looked like a small, transparent leaf made of living crystal, glowing with the same blue light as the seed. "It's beautiful," Hay Newell whispered. The sprout gave off waves of peaceful energy that filled the whole lab. Everyone who came near felt calmer and happier. By midday, the sprout had grown into a small plant about the size of Hay Newell's hand. It had 3 crystal leaves that moved slowly, following the light from the suns. The soil around it had completely changed, looking rich and fertile, like the best earth soil. "The plant is doing more than just growing," Tai Yang said, checking his instruments. "It's improving everything around it. The air quality in the lab is better than it's ever been." Dr. Jeho nodded. "This isn't just a plant," he said. "I think it's some kind of terraforming tool. The ancient civilization that created it must have used these to make planets more livable." As the day went on, the crystal plant continued to grow slowly but steadily. Its light pulsed in a rhythm that reminded Hay Newell of peaceful music. She noticed that when people in the lab felt stressed or worried, the plant's glow would dim slightly. But when they were calm and happy, it would shine brighter. "It responds to our emotions," Hay Newell realized. She asked everyone in the lab to sit quietly for a few minutes, just breathing calmly. The plant's glow became stronger and more beautiful than ever. By evening, the plant was knee-high, with 7 crystal leaves that chimed softly when they touched each other. The soil in the containment unit had spread its richness beyond the borders of the planter, making nearby regular soil darker and more fertile too. "Tomorrow, we should move it to a bigger space," Hay Newell told Dr. Jeho. "I think it's going to keep growing, and it needs room to spread its influence." That night, as Hay Newell prepared her report, she couldn't stop smiling. The crystal plant was more wonderful than anything she had imagined. It wasn't just growing. It was sharing its ancient wisdom, teaching them how to make their harsh new world into a garden. In the lab, under the soft glow of its blue light, the crystal plant continued its gentle work through the night, spreading life and peace in ever-widening circles. 3 weeks had passed since the crystal plant first sprouted. The research station had never been so alive with activity. Senior researcher Yum-Woo Choi had joined Hay Newell's team, bringing his expertise in ancient civilizations to help understand their amazing discovery. The plant now filled an entire greenhouse chamber. Its crystal branches reached toward the 3 suns, filling the space with soft blue light. The ground around it had completely transformed. What was once dry, red rock was now rich, dark soil teeming with life. "The changes are spreading faster than we expected," Yum-Woo said, showing Hay Newell his latest readings. "The plant isn't just growing. It's changing the very nature of our planet." Hay Newell watched as small patches of green grass began to sprout in the new soil. These were not earth plants they had brought with them. These were native plants that had been sleeping in the ground for thousands of years, waiting for the right conditions to return. "Look at this," Yum-Woo said, pointing to his tablet. He had been studying the crystal plant's light patterns. "These are not random pulses. They're a language." He showed Hay Newell how the plant's glow changed in regular patterns. "I think it's trying to tell us something." That afternoon, they made their biggest discovery yet. While examining some of the ancient ruins near the station, Yun-Woo found a wall covered in crystal markings similar to their plant's patterns. After hours of careful study, he began to understand their meaning. "This was all planned," he told Hay Newell. and Dr. Jiho during their evening meeting. The seed we found wasn't just left behind. It was waiting. The ancient civilization that lived here created these plants as guardians. They protect and restore life to dying worlds. As if responding to his words, the crystal plant's glow brightened. Through the greenhouse windows, they could see its light spreading further into the dark landscape. Wherever the light touched, the ground began to change. The transformation is accelerating, Haynul said, checking the environmental monitors. The air outside is becoming richer in oxygen. The soil chemistry is changing. It's like the plant is remembering what this planet used to be like, and it's bringing that memory back to life. Late that night, as Haynul worked in her office, Tai Yang rushed in with exciting news. "You need to see this," he said, leading her to the greenhouse. The crystal plant had produced its first seed. It hung from one of the highest branches, glowing with the same gentle blue light as the original. But this was just the beginning. As they watched, more seeds began to form on other branches. It's not just restoring life here, Haynul realized. It's preparing to spread life to other places too. The next morning, Dr. Jiho gathered all the senior researchers. The crystal plant's influence now extended several kilometers from the station. Satellite images showed a growing circle of transformation spreading across the planet's surface. The harsh, rocky desert was slowly becoming a garden. "We need to document everything," Dr. Jiho told them. "This could be the greatest discovery in human history, a way to bring life to dead worlds." As Haynul looked out at the changing landscape, she felt a deep sense of responsibility. The ancient civilization had trusted future generations to find their seeds and continue their work. Now, after thousands of years, humanity had become the new gardeners of the galaxy. Outside, under the light of 3 suns, the crystal plant continued its peaceful work, turning the barren planet into a living garden, one patch of ground at a time. The crystal garden had been growing for 2 months when the station's sensors detected something new in orbit. Station Commander Sun Mei Kang called an emergency meeting in the control room. A large spacecraft of unknown design had appeared near their planet. "They're sending us a message," Sun Mei told the gathered researchers. "They say they're called the Gardeners, and they've been searching for something exactly like our crystal garden for centuries." Haynul felt her heart beat faster. She looked out the window at the vast garden that now surrounded their station, its gentle blue light visible even during the day. "What do they want?" she asked. "They're requesting permission to land," Sun Mei replied. "They say they mean no harm. They just want to see the garden." After careful consideration and many security checks, Sun Mei gave permission for a small group of the visitors to land. Their ship was beautiful, covered in swirling patterns that reminded Haynul of growing vines. The aliens who stepped out were tall and graceful. Their skin had a slight green tint, and their eyes were large and kind. The leader introduced herself as Keeper Arya. She spoke perfect English through a small translation device. "We have waited so long for this moment," Arya said, looking at the crystal garden with joy in her eyes. "Our ancestors told us stories about the Genesis Gardens, but we thought they were all lost to time." Haynul led the visitors through the garden, watching as they touched the crystal plants with gentle reverence. "Your people knew about these gardens?" she asked. "Long ago, many worlds had gardens like this one," Arya explained. "They were created by the ancient cultivators, a civilization that believed in spreading life throughout the galaxy. But they disappeared thousands of years ago, leaving only their gardens behind. Over time, most of the gardens were lost or destroyed." The visitors shared their knowledge freely. They explained how their own civilization had grown from a small group of gardeners who had once tended one of the last Genesis gardens. But their garden had died centuries ago, and they had been searching for another ever since. "The gardens are more than just plants," Arya told them. "They are libraries of life itself. Each one contains the knowledge to restore entire worlds. But they need careful tending, and they need people who understand peace and harmony to help them grow." Sun Mei listened to everything carefully. As station commander, she had to make an important decision. The gardeners were asking to establish a permanent diplomatic presence at the station, to help tend the garden and share their knowledge. "We would teach you everything we know," Aria offered. "And in return, we ask only to be part of this garden's growth, to help it flourish and spread its gifts to other worlds that need healing." That evening, as the three suns set, Hamnul walked through the garden with Sunle. The crystal plants chimed softly in the evening breeze, their blue light growing stronger as darkness fell. "What do you think?" Sunle asked Hamnul. "Should we trust them?" Hamnul watched as one of the gardeners knelt beside a newly sprouting crystal plant, singing to it softly. The plant's glow brightened in response, and the feeling of peace it gave off grew stronger. "I think this is exactly what the ancient cultivators wanted," Hamnul said. "Different species coming together, learning from each other, spreading life and peace across the galaxy. The garden chose to grow for us, and now it's bringing us new friends to help us understand it better." Sunlin nodded, watching the peaceful scene before them. Tomorrow, she would send her report to Earth, recommending that they welcome these new allies. The garden was no longer just a scientific discovery. It was becoming a bridge between worlds. Hamnul and botanist Da-hyun Shin were working together in the garden early one morning when they noticed something unusual. The crystal plants seemed to be creating patterns in their light pulses that moved from one plant to another, like they were talking to each other. "It's some kind of network," Da-hyun said, watching the lights dance between the plants. She had joined the research team recently and brought fresh eyes to their observations. The plants aren't just growing, they're connecting. As they studied this new behavior, they began to feel something different. It started as a gentle warmth in their minds, like sunshine on a spring day. They could sense each other's thoughts and feelings, but in a soft, peaceful way that didn't feel scary at all. Keeper Aria, who had stayed as the gardener's representative, explained what was happening. "The garden is creating a psychic web," she said, smiling. "It's one of the most precious gifts of a Genesis garden. It helps all living beings understand each other better." Over the next few days, everyone at the station began to experience this connection. It wasn't like mind reading from science fiction stories. Instead, it was more like being able to sense the feelings and basic thoughts of others nearby. The connection made it easier to understand each other and harder to have conflicts. This is how the ancient cultivators kept peace between different species, Aria explained during an evening gathering in the garden. "When you can feel what others feel, it's much harder to hurt them or be unkind." The gardeners shared their ancient records about other Genesis gardens that had once existed across the galaxy. Each garden had been unique, creating its own special type of connection between the beings that lived near it. Some gardens had focused on healing, others on teaching, and some on growing food. Hamnul noticed that even the small animals that had started appearing in the garden were part of this peaceful network. Birds that had awakened from long-dormant eggs would land nearby without fear. Small creatures that looked like rabbits with scales would come right up to people, sensing no danger. "The garden is teaching us how to live in harmony with all forms of life," Da-hyun said as she watched a group of colorful insects dance around a crystal flower. "It's showing us what the galaxy could be like if we all worked together." One morning, Hamnul found something remarkable. In a quiet corner of the garden, a crystal plant had grown into the shape of a small room. Inside, images made of light played across the crystal walls, showing scenes from ancient times. They saw beautiful cities where many different species lived together in peace, all connected by their own gardens. "These are memories," Aria explained, her eyes shining with joy. "The garden is sharing the history of the ancient cultivators with us. It wants us to learn from their wisdom." The connection grew stronger, but stayed gentle. People found they could work better together, understand problems more easily, and find peaceful solutions to any conflicts. The garden's influence had turned their research station into a place of perfect harmony. That evening, as the three suns set, Hamnul sat in the garden with Da-hyun and Aria. Through their shared connection, They could feel the garden's contentment. It had waited so long to find people who would understand its purpose. Now it could finally share its gifts with the galaxy again. News of the Genesis Garden spread quickly through the galaxy. Operations Director Yun-Ho Kim found himself managing an increasing number of requests from different species who wanted to visit. The small research station was becoming an important center for interstellar relations. "We've received messages from 27 different civilizations," Yun-Ho told the station's leadership team during their morning meeting. "They all want to learn about the garden. Many of them remember old stories about similar gardens on their worlds." The station began to change. New buildings grew around the original structure, all designed to work in harmony with the Crystal Garden. The gardeners helped create peaceful spaces where visitors could experience the garden's calming influence. Hanul watched with amazement as ships from different worlds arrived. Each group of visitors brought their own knowledge and stories. Some came from worlds that had once had Genesis gardens of their own. Others came from planets that needed healing, hoping to learn how the garden could help their homes. A group of tall, silver-skinned beings arrived from a distant star system. They were scientists who studied ancient technologies. "Our histories speak of a time when gardens like this one helped dying worlds come back to life," their leader told Haenul. "We have searched for so long to find one still alive." The garden seemed to welcome each new group of visitors in its own way. For some, it created special crystal formations that sang in beautiful harmonies. For others, it showed images in its walls that helped them understand their own histories better. Yun-Ho worked with Keeper Area to organize everything properly. They created special areas where different species could meet and share their knowledge. The garden's psychic network helped everyone communicate easily, even when they spoke different languages. "This is becoming more than just a research station," Yun-Ho said as he showed Haenul the plans for new diplomatic meeting spaces. "It's turning into a galactic center for peace and learning." One morning, a ship arrived from a world that had been damaged by pollution and war. The visitors were thin and tired-looking, but their eyes filled with hope when they saw the garden. The crystal plants responded to their presence by creating new growths that produced seeds specifically suited to their world's conditions. "The garden knows what each world needs," Keeper Area explained. "It was designed to recognize different types of environments and create the right kind of life for each one." Visitors began to take small crystal seedlings back to their own worlds, always following the careful instructions provided by the garden through its psychic network. Each new garden would be connected to this one, creating a growing web of peace and healing across the galaxy. Hanul spent her evenings in a quiet corner of the garden, writing down everything they learned. The crystal plants around her would glow brighter whenever she understood something new, as if encouraging her to keep learning and sharing their wisdom. Scientists, diplomats, and leaders from many worlds came to study and learn. Some stayed for months, others for just a few days, but all left changed by their experience. The garden's influence spread far beyond its physical boundaries, creating connections between worlds that had never known each other before. 6 months had passed since the first crystal seed sprouted. Haenul and xenobiologist Min Ki-song had made an important discovery. They found that the garden wasn't just growing, it was teaching them how to create new seeds. Each crystal formation contains different types of knowledge. Min Ki explained during a presentation to visiting scientists. He pointed to a large crystal structure that looked like a tree made of blue light. "This one holds information about how to heal damaged soil. That one over there knows how to clean polluted air." The garden had grown into a vast network of crystal plants, each with its own special purpose. Some plants created food, others produced clean water, and some helped heal sick creatures. But the most amazing plants were the ones that taught wisdom to those who spent time near them. Hanul spent many hours studying with these teaching plants. Through the garden's psychic network, she learned how the ancient cultivators had spread life across the galaxy. They hadn't just planted gardens, they had shared knowledge about how to live in harmony with all living things. One morning, while Haenul was working with a group of young crystal shoots, something remarkable happened. The plants began to form new seeds, but these were different from any they had seen before. They glowed with rainbow colors instead of just blue. "These are special seeds," Keeper Area said when she saw them. "The garden has decided you're ready to learn its deepest secrets." She explained that these rainbow seeds could create new types of gardens, ones specifically designed for the worlds that needed them most. Min-Ki discovered that each rainbow seed contained a complete library of knowledge. "It's like having an entire civilization's wisdom in a single seed," he said with amazement. "When planted, these seeds will grow into gardens that can teach others everything they need to know about healing their worlds." The garden began producing more rainbow seeds, but only gave them to people it found worthy through its psychic connection. These chosen few had to show that they understood the importance of peace and harmony before the garden would trust them with its greatest gifts. Hanul worked with visitors from many worlds, teaching them how to recognize these special seeds and care for them properly. "The seeds know who is ready to receive them," she told her students. "They can sense if someone's heart is truly dedicated to helping others." The garden revealed another surprise. It showed them how to combine different types of seeds to create new varieties. These new combinations could solve specific problems on different worlds. Seeds for water-scarce planets could create gardens that produced more moisture. Seeds for cold worlds could grow gardens that generated warmth. "This is why the ancient cultivators created these gardens," Min-Ki said as they watched a group of students learning to blend different seeds. They weren't just trying to spread life. They were trying to teach future generations how to become gardeners themselves. By the end of the month, Hanul had trained the first group of new gardeners. They came from 12 different species and would return to their home worlds ready to plant and tend their own Genesis gardens. Through the psychic network, all these new gardens would stay connected, creating a growing web of knowledge and healing throughout the galaxy. The garden had given them its greatest gift, not just the ability to grow new gardens, but the wisdom to know how to use them well. 1 year had passed since Hanul first planted the crystal seed. The research station, now renamed the Celestial Garden, had become the most peaceful place in the known galaxy. The garden covered several hundred square kilometers, its soft blue light visible from space. On this special morning, Hanul stood with Dr. Jaiho Park and Keeper Area, watching as the first graduating class of galactic gardeners prepared to leave. These 50 students from 30 different species had spent months learning the garden's wisdom. Now they would take their knowledge and special rainbow seeds to worlds that needed healing. "I remember when we thought we were just studying an unusual plant," Dr. Jaiho said, smiling at the memory. "Now we're teaching the galaxy how to grow new life." The garden had transformed their whole planet. The harsh, rocky world was now covered in areas of crystal gardens, regular plants, and clear lakes. Animals from the planet's ancient past had returned, awakened from dormant eggs and seeds by the garden's energy. Hanul walked through the crystal archways that connected different parts of the garden. Each arch showed images of the worlds where new gardens would soon grow. One screen showed a pollution-covered planet that would receive its first healing seeds tomorrow. Another displayed a desert world waiting for gardens that would bring back its lost oceans. The ancient cultivators would be proud, Keeper Area said, watching the students practice with their rainbow seeds. Their plan worked perfectly. They kept their gardens safe until the galaxy was ready to understand their true purpose. The garden had grown in unexpected ways. Some crystal formations had become living libraries, sharing knowledge through direct mental connection. Others had developed into meeting spaces where different species could share their cultures and ideas. The peaceful atmosphere made it impossible for anyone to feel anger or fear while in the garden. That afternoon, Hanul taught her final lesson to the graduating gardeners. "Remember," she told them, "these gardens are more than just plants. They are teachers, healers, and bridges between worlds. Treat them with respect, learn from their wisdom, and share their gifts with those who are ready to receive them." The students gathered in the center of the garden for their graduation ceremony. Each one received a special container of rainbow seeds, specially grown for their home worlds. Through the garden's psychic network, they could all feel each other's joy and determination to use their new knowledge wisely. As the three suns began to set, ships from different worlds prepared to take the new gardeners home. Newell felt proud as she watched them leave. Already, 60 more students from 45 species were waiting to begin their training. The garden's influence would keep spreading, bringing life and wisdom to more worlds. "You've done something remarkable here," Dr. Jaho told Newell as they watched the ships depart. "You helped the garden share its gifts with the galaxy." Newell smiled, feeling the gentle thoughts of the crystal plants around her. "The garden did all the real work," she said. "We just had to be ready to learn from it." That night, under the starlit sky, Newell walked through the quiet garden. The crystal plants chimed softly in the evening breeze, their peaceful light stretching toward the stars. Soon, new gardens would bloom on distant worlds, each one a step toward the ancient cultivator's dream of a galaxy filled with life and harmony.